Good morning and welcome back to another morning briefing. It is Friday, the 19th of January. I'm Matty Hewitt. I'm joined by Scott Wilson this morning. How are you doing, mate?
Oh, very well, Matty. It's match day, isn't it? It's
It is.
it's feel I don't know, Friday night football. It's is it the future? I think most of us probably hope not, but it should be good tonight. Looking forward to
Yeah,
it.
I've got the winter warmers out ready for tonight.
Right, I tell you what,
I won't lie.
I know fans. Listen, we get paid to go. I never ever complain about going to watch football, but my
No.
God, it's going to be cold tonight.
Yeah, I'm having flashbacks to the COVID time of snood
Yeah,
up to the eyes, hat over the top,
it is
spit like
going
an
to be like
Eskimo.
that. It's going to be Baltic tonight, but it should be a good game, shouldn't it? You know, there's plenty on it. There's a lot of interest going into it. So if nothing else, that should keep us entertained.
Yeah, it should. I mean, I know Joe, who usually joins me on these in the morning, he did a really good tactical analysis.
Yeah,
A
I
look
enjoyed
back
that.
at how Michael Beale's side set up at Hull, whether they can have a repeat of that at home. That's now on the website. Don't forget to take advantage of our early launch offer. It's £1 for 6 months worth of subscription. We're in partnership with the Sunderland Fans Museum. We'll be heading there just before the game tonight just to take some things in for social. I mean, if you're there, give us a shout, say hello. We might even grab one or two predictions off you if you want to chat. So into the game at Hull, I mean, the away game, I thought it was one of those. It was a really good away performance, but I think the onus is definitely going to be on Sunderland tonight to sort of go in with a front foot display, and it's something that Beale hinted at in his press conference earlier this week.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of things around tonight's game, isn't there? There's everything that happens on the pitch, but I think we've got to accept that probably just as important is the general mood of things off the pitch, because it's not been an easy 2-3 weeks. You know, that's probably the understatement of the century for a whole host of different reasons. And so it just feels like the club needs a positive night tonight just to draw a line under a few things, get everyone back on side, you know, at least start to change the narrative that's been kind of swirling around the club for the last few weeks. And so I think the first 15, 20 minutes are going to be very important in setting that tone. Because, you know, listen, fans will be going tonight wanting to get behind the team, absolutely. But I think it is one of those nights where if things are not going particularly well, then, you know, there will be an undercurrent, I think, because understandably of kind of everything that's going on in the background at the moment. So I think it's really important that Sunderland do get out the traps tonight. I think in terms of the game itself, it's important because I think they need to get Hull on the back foot. But then also, I just think in terms of setting the mood inside the stadium, getting a bit of positivity and momentum going, I think they have to start well tonight.
That's it as well. I mean, home form's important enough anyway, but like you say, everything that's been going on. There was the fan supporter meeting earlier this week, which I'm led to believe Kirill Dreyfus went to. We'll no doubt find out, you know, the ins and outs of that in the coming days and weeks. But like you've said there, it's a very interesting dynamic that Sunderland find themselves in, both on and off the pitch. I think just obviously the departure of Tony Mowbray, Michael Beale's come in, you know, was he the first choice that fans wanted? Probably not, given the links to, you know, the likes of Will Still. But he is here now. Again, I think away from home, they've set up all right. But again, you look at the teams who they have played, Hull, Coventry, Rotherham was a disappointing result, but then they've played Newcastle, Ipswich. That's not an easy run of games by any stretch of the imagination. But, you know, heading into these Borough, these are the games at home where if you really want to be in the top six, you have to get results and you have to win these types of games.
Yeah, it feels like it because I think, you know, I think what you'd say about Beale's kind of results and time so far is probably kind of very middling. You know, they've won games, they've lost games, they've played well in games, they've not played well in games. It doesn't feel like he's really settled down yet. And so this game feels a little bit of a tipping point where in terms of what he's done on the pitch, this probably tips him into a positive or a negative. If someone get a good result tonight, get 3 points, win the game, head into the weekend's matches back in the playoff positions, then I think you have to say that, you know, all things being equal, it's been relatively okay, the early start of the Beale reign. Now, if they don't get a result tonight, then all of a sudden I think you're looking at it and think, well, they probably underperformed in more games under him than they performed in. And that then becomes a real worry looking at, as you say, some of the games that are coming just around the corner. So, as I say, for loads of different reasons, on and off the pitch, it feels like a big night tonight.
Yeah, definitely. Michael Beale can obviously ease that pressure on those who have appointed him if they were to get a win tonight. He himself was asked about, does he involve himself with, the sort of going on in the background, the noise with fans, supporters. He said his main focus has been on the pitch. As I've said there, result against Hull, they got that away from home again. You can take a point off a promotion rival. Interestingly, I think these next few weeks, I know the columnist James Hunter's done a bit on the January window being massive. They do every year. Sunderland seem to find themselves in this situation where it can go one way or the other, can't it?
Yeah.
Their season hangs in the balance depending on sort of January arrivals, and it feels very much the same again. If they can add the experienced players that I think everybody knows that squad needs at the minute, then it hopefully, fingers crossed, it should kick on from here. But I can understand the frustration given the lack of signings to date.
Yeah, I think what's interesting at the minute is that if you listen to Beale, then there does seem to be a sense that if there are going to be signings this month, and I'm with you, I think there has to be something done this month. Then it feels like there has been a little bit of a shift, maybe, and that there is now probably more of a likelihood that of an experienced player or two coming through the door than it certainly felt like for the last two windows under Tony Mowbray, when he was pretty much, telling us outright, that's not going to happen. That's not the way the club are wanting to do things. I've basically been told that's not the way we're going. Well, unless Beale is being kind of sold down the river to a degree, what he seems to be saying is, no, I think we'll get those couple of players in that we need for that. And I think that's interesting because it either suggests that he's got more sway over this than Mowbray had. And that's not impossible, given that obviously he's very new in. Generally, when new head coaches or managers are first through the door, that's the point when they're strongest and they can kind of make things happen a bit more. But maybe there has been a realization from those above that, what, the balance of the squad isn't quite right at the minute. Yes, that's where we want to go long term, but maybe in the short term we are going to have to bring in a couple of more experienced heads, because I think most of us would agree that that's what Sunderland need. They need a goal scorer. We know that. They need a centre forward who can actually put the ball in the net. But I think they also do need a bit of experience. Corey Evans being out was a big, big loss for that. Obviously, selling Ross Stewart, experienced figure, big figure in the dressing room, etc. I think there's probably a need for a couple of those type of players. I mean, look down the road at Borough, and they are broadly following a similar kind of recruitment model as Sunderland. But this month, they've accepted that they've got some very experienced players injured, particularly in defence. And they've gone and brought in Luke Aylan, 33 years old, on a 6-month loan deal. And that's an acceptance from within Borough that, yes, we want to do things a certain way, but every now and then, it's a needs-must situation. And that's the route we just need to go down to get us through this next 6 months. It feels like that for Sunderland, doesn't it? It'll be interesting to see if they come to the same conclusion as Borough's recruitment operation obviously had.
Yeah, I know we spoke earlier in the season, and I think we were at the Borough game, and we said that there's quite a lot of similarities, isn't there, between that Borough squad at the time they just lost Chuba Akpom, Sunderland had just lost Ross Stewart.
Yeah.
The two clubs felt that like they were in a very similar situation, and to a degree, I don't think there's too much dissimilarities between the two sides. I think just like you've said there, I think there is an acceptance, or at least there feels like there's an acceptance from Sunderland now that they do need one or two grey hairs, as Michael Beale keeps putting it. I've put a
that
bit
was
up
the
today.
telling phrase, really, wasn't it? Because it felt like Tony Mowbray has been saying that for a year, but couldn't get through, or wasn't being listened to, or whatever it was. And as I say, maybe come January we'll be saying exactly the same things about Michael Beale. Well, he's made the point, and they just haven't listened to him. But it feels like from the way that he's been saying it and the confidence he seems to have that they are going to do this, that there has been a bit of a shift there.
Yeah, I've put a bit up today just on the sheer amount of minutes that the summer signings have made, and Joe Bellingham is country like miles ahead of those who've come in. I think he's played 4 times as amount as some of the signings.
Yeah.
So while I understand there's a line that they've got to toe between development and bringing these players in, you need results for the here and now as well. That can't get lost. And you know, it's a tough situation they find themselves in. I think that from listening to Michael Beale, at least in his past couple of press conferences, I think we could be looking at 3 minimum.
Yeah.
I think the striker's an obvious one they need. He's spoken about midfield options. I also think, you know, a left-footed centre-half, a bit like Agielesi, can play left-back as well, just given the injuries to Niall Huggins, Dennis Sirkin. I think that's a position that they will look to strengthen, which then, as I've said, you know, the development side of things, that you could see someone, for example, Nectar Triantis, head out on loan, one or two of those. I think Mayenda, Hamir, Bennett, there's question marks over them because they haven't played much football, so they risk stagnating them to a degree.
Yeah, I think you're right. I thought his comments on kind of Hamir and Mayenda were interesting because Beale was basically pretty strongly saying, you know, there's a good chance Hamir might go out. Mayenda probably not. I'd rather have him here. Now, I think Hamir is an interesting one because what do you do with him? You know, the easiest thing to do would be to send him back to Portugal for 6 months and get him some football for a team lower down the kind of Portuguese top flight there and actually get him playing. And that, you know, he'd be much more comfortable probably in that environment and you would get minutes into him. The problem with that approach is you're almost kind of ripping up the attempts that you've made in the last 6 months to acclimatise him in the UK and to English football. So are you then better sending him to League One or League Two and saying, look, this is what English football is all about. Get in amongst it for 3 or 4 months. It'll do you good. And it probably would. But he's a young lad who clearly hasn't really taken to English football particularly well thus far. You know, both Beale and Mowbray now have been quick to say physically he's not there yet. Well, is he going to, you know, is he really going to prosper from being kicked up a height in League Two for 4 or 5 months? It's an interesting one, I think, that.
I think just as you touched on earlier, you know, the past 2 windows, the window just gone in particular, the only real senior experienced player that came through the door was Bradley Dack, and he's had plenty of injury problems. That's maybe one thing that the summer signings have had injuries. Timothy Pembele, I know they speak highly of him, but we haven't really seen a lot of him. I just think it's a fascinating situation that they find themselves in, given the lack of football given to these youngsters. Now, again, it's finding the balance between developing them and putting them in a first team environment, but the need to win games here and now, and especially in this run of games, I don't think you're going to see them too many changes, too much integration. That's something, again, that I put to Michael Beale. And I thought personally at the Ipswich game, I would have liked to have seen Jay Matete come in and just get a couple of minutes. But if they were winning, maybe. But, you know, they were chasing the game, brought to Mason Burstow and Nazari Roussillon. So it can unfold in front of your eyes. What if you have a plan, for example, to ease somebody in if you're not getting the results in the game that you want?
Well, unless there's a massive amount of injuries, then I think Roussin is in a slightly different situation. I think Roussin will get minutes between now and the end of the season, and I think there's an argument that he was he's been unlucky to be dropped when he has been in the in the last few weeks. But I think Burstow, Mayenda, Hamir, it's really difficult to see a scenario where they get a genuine run between now and the end of the season. I just don't see it happening. You know, Beale's come in and seems to have come to pretty much exactly the same conclusions as Tony Mowbray did over those 3, which is that they're just not ready for it yet. So the question then is, what's the best way of getting them ready? Is it a loan back abroad? Is it a loan in this country further down the Football League? Is it staying training in and around the first team, playing under 21 matches? And what's right for one probably isn't right for the other, as he said. Now, obviously, Burstow's in a different situation because he's a loan player. So he stays here, he trains, he'll play the odd under-21 game, he'll get an odd minute off the bench. But, you know, I think we all know that in an ideal scenario, Sunderland would probably have liked him to have gone back to Chelsea. I suspect it's the Chelsea side that are saying, well, because we can't then send him anywhere else, we don't really see the point in bringing him back. We'd rather he just stayed there and did what he's doing. So that's obviously a different scenario. But Hamir and Mayenda, they need to work out what's best for them. Yeah, Matty is an interesting one. I mean, again, he's had this long injury. So if he's not going to get a look in the second half of the season, if Bale doesn't think he's ready or right either, then there's an argument that he probably should go out and play a bit of football again. Because if he doesn't, then that's an entire season where he's barely going to have kicked a ball. So there are decisions over those fringe players to make there. And then obviously, potentially, there's also a decision to be made over Alex Pritchard, who contract situation is still kind of there in the background. Tony Mowbray, what was his quote? It's complicated, I think, was what he said a couple of times about it. So, there'll be a decision to make there if there's a hard and fast bid for Pritchard this month. There's a talk of interest from Turkey, isn't there?
Yeah.
We know that there's been other championship clubs interested in the past. And then obviously you've got the wild card option of a big bid for Clark or Patterson or who we know are being linked with Premier League clubs. So I think it's going to be a really busy last couple of weeks to this, both in terms of incomings and outgoings potentially.
Yeah, I know Michael Beale said he wanted his business done before, heading into the crazy final few days, but that does not leave you a lot of time.
Yeah. I mean, what you want and what you get are often two very, very different things. And in fairness to Sunderland, the one thing I would say here is they're not alone in this. It's been a strange window, I think, and I think I don't know who it was who I read the other day, but one of the managers in the Championship was saying that they think a lot of this is because of AFCON and the Asian Cup, that the Premier League clubs have 3, 4, 5 players away at the moment for the entire month, and that's making them much more reluctant to loan out the type of players who would have been heading into the Championship in previous years and in previous windows, and that actually the pool of potential Premier League loanees is much smaller than it ordinarily would be because A, Premier League clubs have players away at those 2 tournaments, and B, a number of Premier League clubs also have a hell of a lot of injuries at the minute, and so I'm wanting to let fringe players out the door.
Yeah, I think that's something Beale sort of echoed just in he didn't speak about it very long, but that's something that he mentioned as well. Just to sort of elaborate that further, I think as well, the fact that it's, there's a European tournament coming up this summer as well. Personally, I would have thought you would have seen 1 or 2 players try and push to get the minutes that they need if they were to represent their country. But I think, like you've said, like AFCON in particular, they are now on the verges of getting minutes at the parent club, for example. So there's so many things that clubs have to balance and juggle and to try and bring players in. And I think just in general, it has been a pretty slow window. But again, I think fans are right to be frustrated by, the lack of income, and just given, like I think Joe said on the previous podcast, the forward-thinking model. They looked at players that they've missed last summer. I know it doesn't always work out, like in a football manager world where it gets to January 1st, bang, there will go bids in, contract talks. It's a lot more complicated than that, but I can understand fans' frustration in that sense.
Yeah, I think so, because the gaps have been pretty obvious, haven't they? So the targets will have been there. Now, I think what makes it more complicated for Sunderland is that the key one is going to be a centre forward, and that is always the hardest position to fill. And it's nearly always centre forwards that are hanging on till the very end of the window. So, I don't think that's helped them necessarily. But I also see the point that, other clubs have managed to get some players through the door early because they put those building blocks in place. Now, Sunderland, for whatever reason, and we're not privy to that, haven't been able to do that. And so here we are, 2/3 of the way through the window come tomorrow, and we haven't had anyone through the door yet when it's been pretty obvious that they're needed. So, not ideal, but I think you've got to judge this come February the 1st and see where we're at then, because I think it will look different by then.
Just on some of the names that have been linked, obviously the Amad Diallo thing has been just prevalent since he left, hasn't it? But it does look like he'll stay at Manchester United when the window closes, unless something drastically changes.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously, that's been going round and round and round in various different directions all week, doesn't it? I mean, I think in fairness to Sunderland, I think if Diallo does leave Manchester United, then Sunderland would have every chance of getting him, because I am led to believe that the stuff that kind of that Diallo and his camp are saying about the fact that he has a massive amount of respect for Sunderland, he loved his time here. I think that is genuine. I think that if Amad was to go to a club in the Championship, then all things being equal, Sunderland would have a great chance of getting him. But the really strong vibes do seem to be that he's not going to be leaving Manchester United. That for all that he's not been in matchday squads very much over the last month or so, Ten Hag does see him as someone who potentially could be in the second half of the season. So, like you say, you'd never say never, but as we're sitting here at the moment, I think it's very unlikely that Amad goes anywhere this month.
Yeah. Another lone player that Sunderland supporters have fallen in love with as well in the past is Yann, and that's another sort of transfer rumour for the past couple of months, isn't it? Well, let's be honest, since he left the club, it's been, will he come back, won't he? That's an interesting one because he's a free agent. Would they be willing to, the finances behind it, would they be willing to do that sort of deal? That's an interesting one. French core, I've seen suggestions from fans saying that he would help Pierre-Emerick's development. So there are pros and cons to that one as well.
Yeah, I think with that one, you've got to kind of try and sift how much of that is coming from his agent and his camp, and how much there is genuine interest from Sunderland. And I think I don't think it's a case that it's simply his agent stirring things up and there's no interest from Sunderland. But at the minute, I think it's definitely coming more from via needing a club than Sunderland being. Now, if you're going to, clearly the big issue with that deal is that he's a free agent who hasn't played football in the first half of the season. So where's he at? Where's he at? I think if Sunderland were to make that deal happen, they'd need to get him over and almost have a trial and see just how fit he is, how sharp is he, because there's absolutely no point bringing him in if he's realistically not going to be fit to play competitive Championship football for a month. Because he's just because of the name that he is and where he's kind of been and what he's done, he's going to be on relatively big money for a free agent signing. So there's absolutely no point in bringing him in if, like I say, it's going to take him a month to get him up to speed. He plays for a month and then he's off. The season's pretty much done and dusted. That said, we all know what quality Yann Villa had, and we all know that if he's anywhere at that level, what he could offer to this Sunderland team and this squad. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The big worry in my mind, and I suspect the big worry in the mind of Speakman and the rest of Sunderland's recruitment team is, well, is he actually realistically anywhere near that level now? And A, is there any chance of him getting back to that level? And B, if there is, how long is that going to take?
Yeah, I always find it a bit not suspicious, but when a player approaching the latter stages of his career, and you do have a period of time out of the game without playing, what is the reason behind that? He's clearly not been fancied by other clubs. I know he's played in Europe with Olympiacos, but again, like I said, that there are plenty of pros and cons to both. Like I said, I think you just summed it up perfectly. The finances behind it will probably dictate it all. Again, is it worth it? Given the fact he hasn't played, that'll be something that I think we'll see in the coming days. Another one that they've been linked with, Macaulay Langstaff. He's someone who I've watched a lot of. It's interesting in that sense, and I mean, Joe spoke about it. Just can he make the step up? That's a question that obviously people are asking. We have seen it before from the likes of Ivan Toney, blah blah blah. Again, I said I'm not putting them in the same ilk at all yet, but for the price, that the reported price of 1.5 million, that is the type of player I think Sunderland should be going for. Doesn't necessarily have to be a Langstaff, but somebody scoring goals from the leagues below who could step up. We've seen it work before. I'm not saying it would work in this case, but that's just my personal thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you do get if you go for, like, say, a Langstaff is you've got a player who, okay, there's a question mark over whether they're good enough or ready for Championship level. But what we do know is they're good enough and ready to go in and play competitive football straight away in England. And not be fazed by that, and clearly that's a difference to if you go and sign another Mayenda or another Hemia. what you don't have is the uncertainty about acclimatising to England. How long is it going to take them to get up to speed to English football? Can they handle the physicality, the competitiveness? Well, all those boxes are ticked. So I think straight away, that's a more sensible type of signing to make in January. Clearly, the question mark is, he scored a lot of goals at National League level. He's scoring a lot of goals at League Two. Is that transferable to the Championship?
Yeah.
And, to some extent, you don't know till he tries it, do you?
Yeah.
Let's be brutally honest. Because as you say, there are players who have handled the step. There are players who haven't been able to handle it. So it would be a bit of a punt to that respect. But at least it feels like someone who, if you signed him tomorrow, could go in and play on Saturday and not look completely out of place like a rabbit in a headlight in English football.
Yeah, I think the point I've tried to make in a roundabout way is, but we have seen it before, haven't we? Lee Gregory's another one who was at Halifax, came through, made the move to the Championship, scored goals. I think from my personal experience of Macaulay, he will, kick on again. That's my personal view on it. Just having watched him at Gateshead, not to count again, he was incredible last year. He's already got 20 and we're in January. I just think these types of players pop up every so often in a blue moon, and they do that. I think if you're in a position and you're looking at him and you pass up an opportunity to sign a player like that, scores goals, has scored goals. All right, he's only had 6 months at this level, but look, the record speaks for itself. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I think it's one of those where you could look back on and think, maybe we should.
And I think the other thing with signing a player like that is what, let's say you get him for $1.5 million. Because of his age and because he has scored goals at a lower level, even if it didn't really work, now I'm not saying you'd get $1.5 million back for him, but you get something back from him. You will always have a value now because, as I say, of his age and the fact that he is at least proven in the lower leagues. So, I think that, signing a type of player for that kind of money, again, feels probably less risky a financial investment than going and trying to pluck someone from the French lower leagues for a similar kind of price or whatever, because it feels like he will hold a value in English football better. Now, the argument has always been, but actually, if you go and sign that type of player, say from the second tier in France, they're playing at a much higher level than the fourth tier in England, and you can get a better player, a better bang for your buck. Well, yeah, maybe, but the evidence of last summer doesn't really suggest that that's been the case so far with Sunderland's recruitment, does it? So, we'll see.
Yeah, then obviously, lastly, we'll just move ahead on Hull. Obviously, they are another interesting club. I wasn't expecting them, truthfully, to be up there where they are at the start of this season. I thought they'd have a real go at it, and I thought they'd be top half and kick on under Liam Rossnew, but I didn't think they'd be playoff picture. So I've been impressed by what I've seen from them. Away from home, I think we saw again, just Joe touched on a piece that's on the site about their shape, out of possession, in possession. That's very much the way of this modern breed of coaches, and I've been impressed by what I've seen from Hull so far.
Yeah, I've definitely been impressed with Racine. I think that he's one of those, managers that are kind of a lot of people are taking note of. Now, he's probably one of those breed of managers that, will they get a chance in the Premier League? Can you imagine a Premier League club having a punt on a Liam Racine? There's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't, but it probably feels like initially for him to get a Premier League job, he's probably going to have to take Hull into the Premier League to get that. But that's not out the question. I mean, like you say, I didn't have them down as promotion contenders really this season, but I think that's probably because in the back of your mind, you still identify Hull to a degree with the kind of off-field chaos that's been the case for most of the last decade, and the kind of uncertainty there, and the upheaval, and fans protesting against the owners and all of that kind of stuff. Now, clearly, an awful lot of that has stabilised now. The club is in a very different place. There has been investment. That investment seems to be, built on firm foundations as opposed to being built on sand, which it's been there a bit in the past. And like I say, in Racine, they've got, for me, a really bright young coach who knows what he wants and has shaped that team into a really, really effective unit now. So I think they're generally better at home. I think, they're more of a threat there. But, I think the other thing that we'll see is they'll come and play, won't they?
Mm.
They'll be organised, as you've shown, as Joe's flagged up out of possession. But, we're not talking about a team who's going to come and just put two banks of four and say, you have the ball and we'll look to break at you. I don't think Hull play like that anywhere. They've got their patterns of play. They know how they want to attack. So, I think it'll be a pretty attractive game tonight.
Yeah, I mean, we saw last year, didn't we? Just the 4-4.
Well, yeah, exactly, yeah.
So, I mean, if it's anything like that, then there'll be goals. And I noticed that they haven't particularly been on a great run of form. I think it's 1 win in 5 in all competitions. And in the last one, 2 of those games are the FA Cup, so it skews it slightly. But I do think it's a good time to play them. I think it's a good opportunity as well, like I said, for Sunderland to really stamp the raw authority and show what they're about under Michael Beale. First half against Preston, felt like we saw that. Second half, it was a bit Jekyll and Hyde. You tailed off a bit in the second half, but it's a very interesting game tonight.
Yeah.
So thanks again for joining us. Head over to We Are Sunderland, the place to be for everything red and white. You can make the most of our insight, tactical analysis, and exclusive interviews. As I said, James Hunter's new column has dropped this morning. You can subscribe for £1 for 6 months, and we have been in partnership with the Sunderland Fan Museum. So we'll catch you next week.